Hi, welcome to a new episode in the Internet Surfer, hosting the most horror and creepiest stories from Reddit. Please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy.
Has an unexpected event ever changed the course of your life?
Years ago I took an edible and it sent me into a spiral of 24/7 full-blown panic attacks for months. In doing research into what the hell was happening to me and trying to find a fix, I started taking magnesium supplements. After a couple of weeks I started noticing a lot of improvements that I wasn't expecting. I no longer had bi-daily headaches, which I've had half my life. My IBS was gone. I no longer felt so tired that I felt like I was dying every morning. I was no longer a zombie just trying desperately to stay awake all day, and I was able to socially interact with people in ways I never could before, which was previously diagnosed as autism. Turns out I was just severely magnesium deficient for most of my life. I was just so used to it that I just saw it as normal at this point. Unrelated to the magnesium, my mind suddenly went back to normal overnight after a massive migraine a while later. But damn, the whole thing ended up changing my life for the better. Going from being unable to work and being unemployed to working 40 hours a week. I happened to have some savings that I was able to gather, and I saved a little more money before coming here, and then when Japan opened its borders again I moved here and started living off savings while trying to start a business. Most people who move here though do so by getting a job as an English teacher or transferring from another company to the Japan branch. I got the teach English job with house and car given too, but they were closing the borders and lots of unknown things happening at the time. I decided not to go. At this time, I was single and miserable and hated my job, so I wanted something new. Now, I met my loving BF during COVID. My mom got sick last year, so I was happy to have had the time spent with my mom during lockdown and the 2 years before she's bedridden and unable to speak. I was also able to find another job and been able to move up in the company. Crazy how things could change on a whim. It's not always sunshine in my life, but I'm glad I was not where I was before. It was about 1996 and I was 6 years old. My mom and I were taking my big brother, 13 years old, to play bounce pitch with his friends. When we dropped him off I saw one of his friends I hadn't seen before, and there I had it, my first crush. I knew most of my brother's friends, they all had the same last name, so I went home, snuck in his room, found his yearbooks and my dream boy and put a big old heart on him. I thought about him as years went by quite often. No one had ever been quite as handsome. I saw him working at a gas station about 10 years later. I went home and sent him a message on MySpace telling him I had always liked him and if he was interested to meet me, halfway point, on a certain street in the dark Pennsylvania winter. I sat on the curb and over the sound of my own heart pounding I hear him approach. We sat there when he proposed to me, we giggled when we bought our house beside it, we hold hands while we watch our children splash in the puddles where I once sat and waited 18 years ago. Coming home, walking alone from a nightclub aged 17/18 or so. I lived alone and was working and hustling to survive. It was late morning/lunch time. I saw somebody mesmerizing that I knew I would regret not speaking to. She walked into a travel agent. I checked my look in a shop front window, and took a deep breath and walked into the travel agent. Turns out she was coming back from her lunch break and worked there. She was very good at her job. A week later I'd sold all my shit and moved to Asia. Continued on to travel a large part of the world for decades, and back in Southeast Asia now. That was about 25 years ago. Never got a date. Never saw her again. It was a Friday night. I was going to stay home because I was depressed, when suddenly a guy I had matched on Tinder literally 6 months ago, who I never actually met, asked me to hang out, with no romantic intentions. We were both new in the city, so we just wanted to make friends. I was like ugh, didn't really felt ice going, but I didn't have anything else to do. Feeling lazy and unmotivated, I looked at my cat and asked, should I go? She let out a long meow and I was like okay, I'll take this as a sign. I got dressed, I didn't even brush my hair lol, I was looking terrible, and went there. And I was not ready for what happened right after. It took me 5 seconds to realize I would have made a huge mistake if I stayed home. This was almost a year ago. We now travel and work together and we make a great team. Writing this from our airing in Brazil lol, smiley face. On January 24, 2015, my mom passed away from a heart attack. She wasn't the healthiest person, but it still shocked everyone, considering she was only 36. My little sister, 8F, and I, 10M, were at a friend's house for the weekend, and we had no clue what was happening. My father picked us up, but before we left, he was telling my friend's parents what had happened. On the way home, my little sister and I were arguing like siblings do, and he snapped at us, which very rarely happened. I kind of found this odd for obvious reasons but didn't think too much of it. As I walked through the front door, I was calling for my mom but got no response. Again, I thought she was out or something, so I didn't think anything of it. What I found really strange, though, was the fact that my uncle, father's brother, was there, same with my grandma, father's mother. They barely visited due to the fact that my mom and grandma never saw eye to eye. Shortly after my mom's childhood, best friend and her wife were there, older sister, little sister, dad, uncle, grandma, and I were all in my room. My father broke the news to me and my sister that my mom had died with zero emotion. I launched myself at my father trying to get a hit in, but my uncle held me back. After that, I cried into my mom's friend's arms for a solid 20 minutes. After being able to breathe, I walked into the living room, laid down, and cried. My older sister came in and just held me. After that, she asked if I wanted to call a friend to hang out. I'm guessing to take my mind off the shit that I was going through. I found out years later during the pandemic, I was practically living with my older sister, that my douchebag of a father slept with another friend of my mom's a week after she passed. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the events that happened after, but basically, I moved in with my mom's best friend and her wife. I've been with them for 3 years now, and I'm still struggling with my mental health, but it's much better than where I was living with that monster and his abusive wife. Had thoughts of leaving the country I had been living in for 6 years. I was already an immigrant, all my friends had already left and I had no family near me. COVID hit and it made me rethink and postpone it. I thought I would work remotely in this country a bit more, save to have about 1 of my living expenses saved and then move. Bored and stranded at home, went back to dating apps just for fun, given that I was going to move away soon. Met a lovely guy on Coke, so I decided he would be the only person I was going to meet as soon as we had a break from the pandemic restrictions. He did the same. We met, hit it off from the first day, he's the best and here we are, 3 years later, bought a house together, with both our savings from COVID times, and plan to live a long happy life together. I say nothing is only good or bad, COVID was shite, but it also brought me the best partner and love. My parents sold their home and moved south to get out of the snow. I decided to sell my dream home I worked so hard for as a single mom, and move myself and my kids to be close to my parents. I had been single since essentially 2015, and on the day I moved to GA from me, my now husband also moved there from CA. I dated for years in the north with zero results and my first date down south, and he turned out to be the one. I do miss my dream home, friends, and job that made me feel important and had great benefits, but I finally got to experience real romantic love once I let those things go. I also have 2 new babies who are so super loved. He's a good husband and a phenomenal stepdad and dad. We are really broke, but he was the missing piece. If I hadn't have moved, I never would have met him, and the fact we both moved to the same state on the same day, just hits a little harder too. Writing short stories was a hobby of mine years ago, so far down on the priority list though, that I almost never got around to it. At the end of 2016 I was bored and decided to try and write a bit. I went to a creative writing meetup. That group met several times. In the end, the entire group went to eat an all-you-can-eat restaurant. The girl in front of me in the line, part of the writing group, turned around and gave me a piece of sushi. "Here, you should try this one," shrug. "Okay. Why not?" She seemed to be a cute girl. A few days later, on a whim, I asked her on a date. I had been single for close to 7 years at that point. She actually accepted the invitation. We started dating. Now we're close to being a couple for 7 years, 6 of which we're living together, and we bought a house last year. I also own 2 cats now. Never, ever go to a creative writing meetup if you don't want your life to take spectacularly weird turns. "20 years ago I was head of our EMS department at the hospital. We were having a busy night and one of my guys was let go early because his wife went into labor. So I took his spot on a run to transfer a patient to Emory University Hospital. So we're running full code, lights and sirens, and a guy runs the light and the whole thing flipped. 12 days later I woke up. Broken shoulder, fractured skull. My face was literally free-floating when I arrived, my mouth is swollen, and teeth are gone. I can't open my eyes, and my neck ID broken but no spinal cord damage. Speak to the doctor several painful days later and he fills Maven on full extent, L-rad/ulna broken. L-humerus broke our shoulder, dislocated collarbone, broken rotator cuff and bicep torn, all my teeth were shattered. My jaw was broken in 3 places. My orbits fractured like I said, the frontal bones in my face are free-floating. And last but most difficult part, my left eye was pierced by a shard of glass from a bottle of 4 fluids, severing my optic nerve and it wasn't salvable. So imp now 26-27-ish years old. I'm out off work, obviously, and may not be able to return. I loved that job. I felt like I made a difference. My life is completely derailed. I went back to school and got my PhD in history and anthropology. And I pushed hard for it. I overloaded classes. And graduated almost 2 years early. I taught until 2016 when my house burned down due to an electrical short. Now imp 49. I'm on disability because of constant migraines and eye strain, because naturally the eye I lost was my good eye. Didn't need glasses or contacts for it. That wreck has impacted my life in every possible way. I was the only survivor. The ironic part though? The hospital trauma center I spent my initial admission in? Emory University Hospital. In June 2020 I was offered a 6-month contract job in a new city, Hamilton, Ontario. At the time, the role was fully remote due to COVID and I was covering for a maternity leave, so I knew my chances of getting extended weren't great and there weren't a lot of other roles in my field at the time in Hamilton, and there were more opportunities in the city I lived in at the time, Toronto. Still, I left my rent-controlled apartment in Toronto, $500 a month, it was insane, and moved to Hamilton with no real plan other than to give this new role my best effort and hope that they would find a place for me. They couldn't, but it led to my next opportunity, which was Toronto-based but still remote due to COVID. I bought a condo in Hamilton, couldn't afford the major hub, and 2 weeks after firming up the deal I met the love of my life. Since then we have purchased our dream home together. We both live and work in the mid-sized city that we bought our house in, and I honestly pinch myself all the time that my life is so amazing, when I was absolutely miserable before in Toronto. In the end, I never worked a single day in the Hamilton office. There was absolutely no need to move there at all and, in hindsight, it was objectively a stupid and impulsive thing to do. But by sheer dumb luck, it worked out really well for me. Smiley face. On my walk home from work one day, I was hit by a car. When I came to in the hospital, I was banged up and talking about finding the man who helped me. The reports from first responders and witnesses were that I was pulled from underneath the car and briefly regained consciousness for long enough to tell everyone to leave me alone and then starting to try to crawl home, before passing out again. There was never a mystery man beyond the ambulance crew. For me, I remember car, the impact, and then me being somewhere else. I was being held by a man. He told me that I was safe. Always. Loved. Always. And never alone. Now, the brain is a complex thing. No doubt. And fear and pain do funny things to human bodies. So this could have been a mad dose of DMT and my own imagination. Granted. But, I have never had a more real feeling experience than the brief time I spent somewhere else. Daily I go back to those words as a personal mantra of sorts, and whenever life feels painful, overwhelming and lonely, I recall and find comfort. So, the experience gifted me strength to continue through the worst days and some certain first-hand knowing that what we perceive is not all there is. I was 26 and it was 2014 when I used to work at a temp agency helping deliver alcohol to businesses. Crap pay, but it is what it is since I moved from CA to Atlanta and couldn't find a job. There was the ice storm that shut down the entire city and my job said I got to come in or else I'll get fired. My stepdad to me, hell now my ass will be stuck on a freeway somewhere, so I got fired from it. Then my stepdad convinced me to join the army. Couple of months later, I enlisted for what I thought would be a 4-year term. 10 years later, with a wife of almost 7 years, 2 kids, IT certs, and me traveling for work. I'd never imagined to be set for good pay with benefits and be set for great pay whenever I'll leave the army. I'm in Japan just relaxing for a bit and enjoying from where I came from to now, especially being from the hood. I was in Manchester the day of the bombing, December 3, 1992. I had an early hospital appointment and decided to go into Manchester and do some window shopping and go home. I walked past the van about 30 or 40 minutes before it exploded. Lucky for everyone, the police had received a coded warning and cleared the area. The volume of the explosion and the vibration I will never forget. I'm glad no one was injured. It was placed in a quiet part of the city but still did a lot of damage. It changed my life. I realized how fragile life is and how easy it would have been to put somewhere else with no warning and killed hundreds of people. "7 years ago, while I was in my 4th year of high school, I came out as trans and was very severely depressed and anxious. I got bullied a lot and lost a lot of my friends. School really was hell for my last 2 years of HS. One of my teachers told me about this place for queer kids that were like super far downtown in my city. I didn't think anything of it but still wrote down the info. Fast forward a couple months, I'm in the car coming back from the psych ward and not doing any better and actually thinking about ending it when my mom who was driving took a path I knew was opposite to the one home. She told me she found the paper with the information on it and she's taking me to this place for queer kids whether I like it or not. After trying to convince me for 30 minutes, she basically forced me in the building. She definitely saved my life. This place became the center of my whole world and my main place for support. That's where I learned how good I was at helping people and making them open up about issues they had. That's where I met most of the most important people in my life, including my significant other. And now, I am a social worker at that place and I help kids who are struggling like I was. Thanks Mom for forcing me out of my comfort zone." I had a job working for the railroad in 2011 and it looked like I'd be working another 12 years before I could retire. I also weighed 265 pounds, hardly ever dated and was pretty much alone all the time. Then I took a trip to Thailand and within a week I had a bike accident which sent me back home to have surgery on my leg. After 6 months of rehab the leg didn't look like I'd ever be strong enough to work full-time again. Was retired with a disability. Moved back to Thailand. Met a woman, fell in love and got married. I now had a lovely wife who had 2 fantastic daughters who couldn't have treated me better. Bought a new house. Got a new car. Got 3 dogs. Dropped my weight down to 190 pounds. So then I find myself sitting on a beach in a beautiful part of the world. I'm retired, I have a full loving family, a home, a car, 3 crazy dogs and I'm thin and healthy. It's only 2015 and my old life seems like it was 1,000 years ago. My ex tried to choke me as a warning to behave better, twice. After a year of torture with sleep deprivation and gaslighting. He wanted me to stop working for my health because I was so tired and sick all the time. First time I just thought it was a once-off or I'm imagining things. He couldn't do that, could he? Second time I was like, that's it. I'm done. Found new job then week after I put my first paycheck as deposit with cash for the room and escaped the same day. Went to therapy soon after. To clarify, I went NC with abusive family and burnt bridges with all my friends and also moved countries for him, partially, thanks to him although I probably disregard how much manipulation went on there due to blanking out that year of my memory, so I had nothing and no one. I stayed in the country though. 7 years later and still here, now in therapy and with lovely husband and child. I was 20 and jobless. Went to a cough shop to smoke some weed. Saw my old high school math teacher/mentor sitting there so I joined him. At this point we previously had smoked some joints together a handful of times. I told him I was looking for a job and he said he knew of a place where I would probably fit in quite well. But it was on Vlieland, which is one of the small islands in the Waddenzee to the north of the Netherlands. The job was at a bicycle rental and repair shop. I thought about it for a week and then decided to do it. I ended up living there for 2 years and loving the job, the life on such a small island driven by tourism, and made new friends. Vlieland has around 1,100 residents and gets around 100,000 tourists each year. This was also the first time I moved out, so it was a good experience for personal growth. In 2016, my younger sister was supposed to learn German in order to switch to a better 6th grade. I was the one who was supposed to stay and teach her, despite me myself not knowing any German at all. Fast forward 1 month, my sister never moves grades and doesn't give a shit about German, whereas I'm so motivated to learn and I do it so quickly, that I ended up doing a full-on German course. That is where I met my first girlfriend. I was with her for almost a year. She was my first everything, except for virginity. I still haven't lost that simply 'cause I didn't feel right. Addiction. It did a number on every aspect of my life for 5 years. Then 4 years after that, a more casual addiction for 3 years. Cocaine is a hell of a drug. Freebase is even worse. Lost 5 years of hard work and dedication to my career right at the start. Lost momentum on it all. Gave up music. Lost many friends. Was highly functioning and kept a job but ended up having to move out of province to get clean. I wasted a lot of time. I'm still trying to catch up and still under the stigma of addiction. My wife died. I was notified at work. I tried going back but it was too hard. I hated being in that building, so I took a job waiting tables at a student restaurant. A couple of weeks later one of my coworkers asked me out. I wasn't ready to date, but I was ready to have a little fun. She got pregnant while having fun with a different coworker. I was asked to adopt the baby. I wasn't looking to adopt a child and I didn't like the thought of taking my friend's baby. I let her move in with me. We moved to Texas while she was pregnant, and our son was born. We ended up being together until our son was 4, when she decided raising a child with disabilities was too hard. To be fair though, she had asked me to adopt because she didn't think she was ready. I've been a single mom now for 13 years. He's the best thing that has ever happened to me. Back in 2008 I took my fiancée to a family reunion where they all got to meet her and all. Went back home and went to sleep. When I woke up the next morning I was in a hospital in a wheelchair. It wasn't the next morning but about 2 months and a bit later. Found out I was in a car accident and my fiancée died in it. I don't remember my last month with her. I had to start over. I had to learn how to walk, talk, read, and write again. I have short-term memory loss which sucks at times. But still to this day I have no memory of what happened or my last month with her. Friends and family tell me things like what we did and all that. No memory whatsoever. It is blank. When I was 16, I used to hang out with these not good guys. We used to hang out every weekend, all weekend. One Thursday, I decided to be the guy to go buy some drugs and end up getting clipped in a drive-by. Nothing serious. In and out. Through and through. Just barely got my muffin top. If I was a 36-inch waist instead of a 38, it would have missed me completely, but because of this bullet wound, my parents decided to actually pay attention to me that weekend and wouldn't let me leave. That weekend, my friends ended up going to one of the guy's grandpa's house to get some money for weed. Two of the dudes waited in the car while he based his grandfather's and grandmother's heads in with a hammer. All three guys were charged with 2 counts of murder. If I hadn't been shot, I likely would have been in the car with the other 2 guys. The 2 guys in the car served 5 and 7 years in prison after testifying against the other guy who is still in prison 30+ years later. One evening, late 80s, my sister walked into the restaurant I worked at and told me that my youngest brother was being life-flighted to a hospital across town. My bill would drive us there. I arranged to leave, quickly changed, and off we went. We got there at the same time as my parents and the helicopter. Brother was rushed into surgery for a ruptured spleen and we were informed that he was in a coma and had a broken neck. He survived. Quadriplegic with sensory nerves intact. I spent the next 7+ years averaging 40 hours a week helping with his care. I also worked full-time and continued to raise 3 kids with my husband. My body suffered with 4 to 5 hours of sleep a day. My house burnt down, my husband was deemed bipolar, and I had 3 out-of-control teenagers by the time I cut back on the hours at my parents' house. I helped occasionally for the next 10 years until he passed away in 2005. My parents and siblings were all greatly affected. The latest fallout is from my mother's trust. It wasn't what some siblings expected, all because of the accident and situations that followed.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.